We, the Vice Premier and I now call this the Geneva mechanism to prevent any misunderstandings because President Trump and Party Chairman Xi have a very good relationship, but the relationship did not make its way down through other levels of government. So I think the important thing is that after this weekend, we have a mechanism to avoid escalation like we had before. We've had very productive discussions. The island of Taiwan has presented very good proposals.
And we're really excited to have Secretary Bessent with us, fresh off a flight from Geneva. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Secretary. You have had quite a few weeks and a very important meeting in Geneva, a series of meetings with the Chinese counterparts and success. It sounds like you have made huge progress in the relationship, and the next 90 days are going to prove to be critical. Can you share a little bit more about the deal, how the talks went, and what you think will happen in the next 90 days?
Good. Well, thank you, Dina, Excellency. First of all, I'm going to say it's wonderful to be here. I have a long history with the kingdom. The governor of South Carolina, where I'm from, John West, was the ambassador to the kingdom under President Jimmy Carter. He was a close family friend, so I grew up hearing stories about the kingdom as a child. And then my first proper job in New York City was working for the Olean Group. I have a long history with Saudi. Yes, so we had a very active dialogue in Geneva this weekend. It was very constructive. Both sides came with a clear agenda, but shared interest. We had great mutual respect. And I think what we were able to establish as President Trump and the administration began the tariff program, we had a plan, we had a process, and what we did not have with the Chinese was a mechanism. So the Vice Premier and I now call this the Geneva mechanism to prevent any misunderstandings because President Trump and Party Chairman Xi have a very good relationship, but the relationship did not make its way down through other levels of government. So I think the important thing is that after this weekend, we have a mechanism to avoid escalation like we had before. We both agreed to bring the tariffs levels down 115%, which I think is very productive because where we were with 145 and 125 was the equivalent of an unintended embargo that is not healthy for the two largest economies in the world. It is not healthy for the rest of the world. So I think we can proceed from here. We have a very good framework, and as I said during IMF week in Washington about 3 or 4 weeks ago, there is a possibility, it's not a certainty, but that as Ray Dalio might say, we could do a big, beautiful rebalancing. President Trump wants to rebalance the American economy back to a manufacturing economy with high precision manufacturing. I think everyone agrees, including Chinese leadership, that they need to rebalance towards more of a consumption and consumer economy. And the dream scenario would be if somehow we could do that together.
And what do you think the next 90 days look like? It sounds like very productive meetings and now people talking to each other, as you say. Were there areas that you kind of put to the side or, really put everything on the table?
I think everything is on the table. We have a very good framework from President Trump's first administration. There was a treaty that was signed, a trade treaty, a trade agreement that was signed in January 2020. So we're not starting from ground zero. We have a framework, and we can go from there. Obviously, many things have changed over the past 5 years. And look, what we don't want, and both sides agreed, we do not want a generalized decoupling between the two largest economies in the world. What we want is the U.S. is going to decouple in strategic industries, which we saw during COVID. We had become woefully non-self-sufficient. So whether it's medicines, semiconductors, other strategic areas. So the United States will bring those industries home. But the idea isn't a generalized decoupling. And we do have a very large trade deficit with China. That could be solved in many ways. And my hope it is via Chinese buying more American goods and the U.S. selling a kind of opening up of the Chinese consumer, and then that will lead to more fair and balanced trade.
One last question on trade. President Trump has tasked you and Ambassador Greer and Secretary Lutnick to look at other countries and hopefully have other deals like you did with the UK. Do you feel good about several of those also coming through in the next period of time?
Yes, so I've been focused on the Asia deals, of which obviously China is the largest. We've had very productive discussions with Japan. South Korea is going through a governmental change, but before they went into the election cycle, the South Koreans came with very good proposals. Indonesia, who's a large trading partner, has been very forthcoming. The island of Taiwan has presented very good proposal. Thailand, so things on my side of the world, things are going very well. I think the U.S. and Europe may be a bit slower. My personal belief is Europe may have a collective action problem, that the Italians want something that's different than the French. But I'm sure at the end of the day, we will reach a satisfactory conclusion.
Mr. Secretary, you, most of your life, were an investor. And in fact, you were known as one of the greatest investors of your generation. You saw a few global trends before other people did, made some big bets. Part of that definitionally means you know how to manage volatile markets. You recently said we should be prepared for some bumpiness as we try to reimagine the U.S. economy. And there are 3 pillars you have talked about, which is reimagining trade, enacting the tax cuts that President Trump started in 2017, and deregulation. Can you just talk a little bit more about those 3?
Yes, and I would also say, just to reiterate, the strength of the U.S.-Saudi relationship, that I believe it was my 2nd or 3rd day at my desk, I went around the world, and my first 2 calls in the evening was to the finance minister in Tokyo. Then the following morning was to His Excellency. So that shows the priorities of the U.S. government. This will be President Trump's first trip. This would have been President Trump's first trip abroad, if not for the death of the Pope. This will be his first state visit. What we are attempting to do in the U.S. is to further create it as the world's premier investment destination. And the Trump economic agenda really consists of 3 parts. Thus far, we have seen trade, which has gotten most of the publicity, and President Trump wants to reorder the U.S. engagement with other countries. And I will tell you that the tariffs, the non-tariff trade barriers, currency manipulation, and subsidies of labor and capital are coming down quickly. So I am optimistic that on trade, we could actually see more frictionless trade globally. The second part of the agenda, which is moving better than I would have expected, and as a newcomer to Washington, I would say that it was my highest level of anxiety, was the tax bill. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was not passed until December, just before Christmas of President Trump's first year. I believe that we will have it passed this summer, and we will make the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. We will add more features that are very friendly to capital. We're going to bring back 100% expensing. If you build a factory in the U.S., you can expense it immediately. The equipment for that factory can be expensed in the first year, and we think that that will be very powerful. That was the most powerful aspect of driving growth and jobs during President Trump's first term. And I believe that the permanence, so we will no longer be talking about tax cuts. Once this bill becomes permanent, this will be the law of the land for the U.S., and there will be great certainty on the tax side. And then the third side is deregulation. And I think really when I look at the kingdom, when I look at the U.S., the one thing I see is great optimism and a can-do attitude. We've seen it in states, the U.S., we have a federal system, state to state. We've seen it in states like Texas, which has a very much a can-do attitude. Florida, we're seeing big migrations there. And what President Trump wants to do is make the rest of the United States more like Texas and Florida, where deregulation is down, permitting time is down. You know, what's the use of saying we are going to be an AI superpower if the permitting takes 3 years? What's the use of saying we want to expand our energy dominance if you can't get pipelines through? So we are going to deregulate substantially. It is also very good for inflation for the American households, because during President Trump's first term, what really generated the non-inflationary growth was there was a demand shock from the tax bill and from that stimulus. It was met with a supply response from deregulation, and you ended up with very strong non-inflationary growth. I think what happened under the Biden administration was you had a demand shock from government spending, and if we have time, we could come back to how we're going to get that down. But it was met with supply constriction, and that's how we got the great inflation of 21, 22, and 23. So we are really setting the stage with the trade, tax, and deregulation for what we think could be will be a very strong period of non-inflationary strong growth.
Thank you. And thank you for plugging Texas, where I grew up, but Pennsylvania is very strong too.
Pennsylvania is on its way.
Thank you both so much for an excellent panel and for starting off the summit so well. We're so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.